Once upon a time, once upon a time, once upon a time, before time began, in a kind of time that wasn't time, it was just a rhythm. And everything that came into being, everything that was enacted, was caught up in the rhythm of that tempo that was the original time. And everything that happened for the very first time, even when it happened again. And again. In a time like that, there was a kingdom. And the lord of that kingdom was called the White Tsar. And the White Tsar had 3 sons. The eldest was named Dmitri. And the second son was named Vasily. And the youngest son was called Ivan. The palace was gorgeous. It was a fantastic and wondrous thing, but most wondrous of all was in the center of the palace was a walled garden. It was full of enchantments, rare and exotic plants and trees and flowers, and most beautiful, most wondrous of all, in the center of the garden was an apple tree. No ordinary apple tree. On this tree grew apples of solid and pure gold. The golden apples of the sun. And it was the pride and joy of the White Tsar. He loved that tree more than he loved anything. But it did happen that this wondrous tree got the attention of a wondrous bird. The firebird saw the tree with the golden apples. In the midnight, deep in the darkness of the night, the firebird came down into that walled garden and took 3 golden apples from the tree. And the next morning, the White Tsar went into his garden to admire his tree, and he counted the apples, and he saw immediately that 3 were missing. He thought to himself, it must be the firebird. The next morning, 3 more apples were gone. You know how this is gonna go. Every day there were fewer and fewer of the golden apples on this beautiful, resplendent tree. And the White Tsar was becoming very upset. He called his 3 sons together, and he said, "My sons, what are you going to do about this?" And they talked it over, and they said, "Well, we'll catch the firebird. We'll capture the firebird. And the firebird will then belong to you." And the White Tsar liked this idea very much. So the first night, the eldest son went out into the garden. He sat down under that apple tree, got comfortable, leaned his back against the trunk of the tree, and there it was in the darkness, only the glimmer of the apples in the moonlight and a cool breeze. 1 hour went by. He began to get drowsy. 2 hours went by, and he was sound asleep. So that in the midnight, when the Firebird came, he knew nothing. In the morning, the White Tsar came out. He looked at his son. He said, "What happened?" The son said, "I stayed awake all night, and the Firebird did not come." Now, this father looked at the tree. He looked at his son. He was a little disappointed, and he said nothing. He said nothing. Now it's the second night. It's Vasily's turn. Sitting under the tree, the glimmer of the apples in the moonlight and the cool breeze, the fragrance of the flowers. 1 hour went by, 2 hours went by, 2.5 hours, and he was sound asleep. So that in the midnight when the Firebird came, he knew nothing. Nothing. In the morning, the White Tsar came rushing into the garden to see what had happened. He looked at his son. "Well, tell me what happened." Vasily said, "Father, I stayed awake all night, and the Firebird never came." The old man looked at the tree long and hard. He looked at his son long and hard. He said nothing. Nothing. Now it was Ivan's turn. Under the tree, in the moonlight, the cool breeze, the fragrance, the intoxicating fragrance of all the flowers. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, he stayed awake, and finally the Firebird arrived, and it lit up the whole garden. He poised himself. He waited for the right moment, and he leaped a leap. But just as he leaped, the Firebird took to wing, and he caught only one tail feather, one golden tail feather in his hand, and the Firebird was gone. In the morning, the White Tsar came rushing into the garden, and there was Ivan, and he held on to that feather with all his might. He wasn't about to lose it. Father said, "Tell me what happened." He said, "I waited. I stayed awake, and I'm sorry to say I didn't catch the Firebird, but I did get this golden feather, and I give it now to you." And the father took the shining feather of the Firebird, and he was very pleased. He said, "This will be an heirloom that will remain in our family for all eternity." And he took it into the treasury, and it lit up the whole room, and all the golden treasures and jewels were lit up by the single feather of the Firebird. It was fantastic. Now, fantastic! It was fantastic! But was one feather enough? One feather? One feather? No! A fantastic feather like this? No, it's not enough. I want the whole bird! The whole bird! He called his sons together. He called Dmitri and Vasily. He said, now you two, I want you to go out into the world. I'll give you horses, I'll give you money, I'll give you the road, and you go out and you get the firebird and you bring it back here to me. And they said, all right, we'll do it, and we will not fail. Then he turned to Ivan and he said, but not you, Ivan. Not you. You'll stay here with me. I'd be too lonely if you went away. And besides that, you're too young. And plain looking. So you stay here with me. And Ivan was not happy about this. And the two elder brothers were gone. And every day, Ivan made up 10 reasons why his father should let him go. And for the 10 reasons, the father had 10 answers. Well, you see, if I died, then who would rule the kingdom? And what if the peasants uprise? And who will lead the army? You know, you have to be here. I need you to be here. I need you to be near me. You're too precious. You're too dear. And I love you with all my heart. I can't let you go. This went on for a long time. And finally, the father relented. He couldn't stand to see his son so unhappy, and he relented. He said, all right, I'll give you a horse. I'll give you some money, and I'll give you the road. And you go out and see what you can do. And maybe you'll bring me the firebird, but maybe your brothers already have it. But come back as soon as you can, all right? So now the youngest son left his home. He went out on his resplendent horse. It was a gorgeous horse. And he rode through the forest on a winding road. It was a dark forest. And he rode for a long way, or a short way, or an even longer way, or however long it takes a man like that to come out of the forest into a great open place where there was a one single pillar of stone standing in the middle of a crossroads, at the very center of a crossroads. And he rode up to that standing stone, and he saw that there were inscriptions written in the stone. And he got down off the horse, and he began to read. And this is what the pillar said. He who continues on in a straight line from this pillar in the direction that he had been going, he will die, and his horse will die also. He who goes to the left, his horse will die, but he will live. He who goes to the right, he will die, but his horse will live. So he sat down and he began to weep. He thought about his dumpla, and he wondered which way his dumpla would say he had to go. and we will leave him there, sitting in front of that pillar at that crossroads, trying to decide which way was his road. We're just a short way into the story, but it's a good stopping place. I think for me it seems like a place that we've all come to at different points in our life. Which road is for me? I often choose the wrong road and have to make my way back to the pillar. Yeah.
So for those of you that are new and haven't been here before, just take yourself back through the gorgeous stream of images and find the place that confuses you or delights you or intrigues you, because there's some secret in that for you. We're just going to take some time, and if you have the courage, say where you are in the story. What's caught your attention?
We call this feeding the story because the story is feeding us. And so it's possible that you'll say something that another man doesn't have the courage to say, and then they'll find out they're not insane for thinking what they're thinking because you've said it. Yeah. So whatever you have, we want to hear it.
Why did not the father confront the first two sons? Why did not the father share his concern for the missing apples?
That's a good question.
I'm interested in the Firebird himself, or itself. And what is the Firebird?
It's a dangerous thing to be interested in.
There's a lot of dead around the Firebird. A lot of dead people, a lot of dead poets, a lot of dead musicians, a lot of great ones.
A lot of D4C.
Some people catch the Firebird too early, and they get burned up.
Think about all the ones that checked out at about 27, 28. Morrison, Hendrix, whoever else. Joplin. Yeah.
The whole thing with the bird, with the horse, like to go to the right and I die and the horse makes it. I can't see how I would do that, but like you said, that would seem to be the most intriguing thing.
Just before we go too far ahead, how did it feel, that description at the beginning of this extraordinary scene? Did you want to be there? Is that a place you wanted to be? Were you attracted to it? The great garden and the apple tree, is that a place you'd like to be?
I was struck by a man who would count golden apples on a tree. You know, isn't a tree that bears golden apples enough? You have to count the apples.
It's what SARS do.
Yeah.
I was struck by the fact, I think there's a short story within the big story. Like the Tsar, I have 3 sons. My youngest sons are always trying to fill the shoes of their older brothers. When the young son got the feather, the golden feather, he established a bond with his father. His father could trust him in a way that perhaps had been overlooked with the father's energy focusing on the older brothers. The story could have stopped right there for me.
Yeah. Part of the genius of the stories is, of course, on one level we relate to it emotionally and quite literally, and we immediately see these dynamics in our own lives. But on the other hand, you know, what had to happen to us 3 times before the gorgeous amnesia of the world didn't keep us asleep anymore? There's another version of this story where young Ivan climbs up a tree to stay awake, and he sits uncomfortably in the cold, and it is in that moment that he stays awake for the Firebird to come. So as we go deeper into this story, we're working on a variety of levels. You've got to be quite nimble. So you relate to it with your heart first of all, but then things like the 3 sons or the 3 daughters in other stories are often talking about something that will come round 3 times.
or three aspects of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah,
And the youngest son is often connected with the mother.
yeah.
And the mother is never mentioned in this story.
No. What is mentioned is that not much is invested in Ivan. They see him as a plain lad. Plain. There's affection for him, but he's not being sort of set up. There's not the time and attention he's not being groomed in the way that the other two. There's something marginal in the quality of him.
I'm really struck right now about this business of the Tsar wanting the whole Firebird. And meanwhile, Ivan has managed to get the one feather that's plucked. And I know that happens in more than one story, and I'll also wager that in any of these stories, nobody really gets the whole Firebird. So I'm seeing in that tension between wanting the whole Firebird and getting the feather some kind of play, between, our greed and just the generosity of the universe that would even give us one of these feathers that would light up the whole room.
The other side of that greed, though, is the ambition of the king that starts the story. Without the ambition, not much is going to happen. Tim, you know that moment where you were thinking about the feather, did you feel grief as it was being kind of put away, something from the wild being put into a box? How did you feel about that?
It was an impression of that much light in a room.
Yeah.
Struck with the marker too. It made me think of those Herms in the Greek mythology, and that sort of boundary marker that's beyond this point is something else is happening, and on this side something else. And it's three again choices. Interesting. That's what he comes to.
I'm just struck by the first two sons not telling the truth because they believe in it.
Yeah, I see a lot of my journey in this story. When I was 24, I had to leave my parents, and I moved from New York all the way out to California to find out and remember what I needed to do. And so I really identify with the young son in this, and the pulling and pleading and then the eventual break. And finding myself out into the wilderness and into hot springs and learning to love myself on my terms, not on who my father and mother wanted me to be. And at that crossroads, I went with the horse, and I let the horse die. The horse was in graduate school, and I used it for a means to an end, and now I do the work in the wilderness. I know it comes with sacrifice, and I acknowledge it and also bear it.
Being the youngest of four boys, the three older brothers, I relate a lot to the story because in some ways I was the lucky one because I got the little feather, and they couldn't do it because they never had the opportunity. But there's also a price to pay for that. In that, the father gives the attention and the praise to the older brothers and sort of sees you as, or takes it for granted. And I really relate to that part of the story.
I'm struck by the images in the garden, the glimmering moonlight, the light breeze, and the fragrant smells that intoxicate the two older brothers to fall asleep. I just find that, very intriguing and intense. So it's like, could I go in that situation and not fall asleep too?
There's something for me, there's a hint of a sedative in that garden. And when I have friends that live outside of Europe or America, they view us as living in that rosy garden. They really, really do, and they want in. And in the absence of the real smells, the manufactured smells of perfume or television, is a kind of, there's something of a trance in this place. And there's also something that's been set up for a long time. Like there's a sense of permanence on the edge of stagnation in this garden.
There's something of a tremendous power, though, in those golden apples.
Yeah.
Because, this has got to be something really powerful and strong for the Firebird to
come.
even be interested
Yeah.
in it. So there's some kind of play of massive energies going on here.
I was, for me, it was interesting because when the father doesn't say anything to the first son who fails, after the son lies to him and tells him he was awake, and the father recognizes that, that was really painful. I felt that, you know, that absence, when he doesn't respond, he says, okay. So for me, there was something there. And then on the second occasion, when the second son does that, and the father responds the same way, it was a lot less painful as I heard that. And I'm not sure what's there, but just for me, that was the case. It was like, the first one was really poignant. It almost brought me to tears when the father doesn't say anything. And the second one was like, okay, you know, same old shit. I don't know, I'm not sure they're...
I felt a certain exhilaration when this younger son got on the horse and rode to the forest. And then when he got to the pillar and read it, it was like, oh shit, now what? And without, like, I need some more information. I didn't bring with me everything I needed.
Sorry, guy right at the back with a hoodie on.
Yeah, I kind of was thinking along the same lines. And the younger son, you know, he kept going to the father, saying, you know, and had all these questions, why can't I go out, whatever, you know, and then the father wanted to keep him, and the son kind of like wants to rewrite the book that the father's already written, you know, the father, the image I got was, had him, he knew that he needed to be there with him, and finally he let the son go ahead and rewrite the book, and he wasn't prepared for what he was going to be faced with. And so he ends up, you know, in that place, in that dilemma.
Yeah. I mean, the question for me, I guess, when I first did it, is what pulled me out of my father's garden? What pulled me out?
Since my parents have passed, I'm spending more time with my brothers. And the place that in this story that catches me is when the father doesn't want to let the youngest son go. Because in our family that was true for my younger brother. He's the one who never went to college, he never got married. And even though we're spending more time together, there's something superficial in our relationship because he's still in that spot, and in a way, we don't talk about the fact, you know, of that, but it affects all of us in a sense.
There's something that happens, I think, when these kind of boys, you know, they don't get away, and then there's this sort of critical stage where they do get away, but they don't come to the pillar. They don't come to that pillar. If you don't come to the pillar, then you're just a wanderer. Because you don't have to make the choice. You're just meandering around, you know? You're like a ghost. You're haunted by things, desires, and longings that maybe should have been fulfilled, maybe shouldn't, who knows? But you don't come to this critical moment of having to make this choice of destiny.
And I mean, think about the horse for a minute. Do you remember that one of the instructions is, you know, you may live, but your horse is going to die. Something has to die.
Right.
So what is the horse that man is riding? What's he riding? What's it made of? What's the muscles? What's the information? What's going on?
There's 3 choices. It's great. You know, it's really cool choices because what the first choice is go straight ahead and you'll both die. That's an option. That's an option. A lot of us took that. You know, and then there's the one, well, I love the horse so much, I'll go to the left and the horse will live.
I am stuck on an image for me at the crossroads in the pillar of the younger brother trying to make a decision when he's got a desire to do what his father asked, to find the Firebird, but also having the realization that his two older brothers came down the same path at some point and went one of those directions, not knowing their outcome, their fate, trying to, I guess, decide based on so many different possibilities, I guess, what to do.
I have a host of questions. One is, what is the motive of the Firebird? It has it all. Resplendent bird. And he has this pattern, 3 apples at a time. It's predictable. So he's sort of provoking and making a statement before the Tsar. And then the Tsar, then the apples, there's no more mention about apples missing. The Firebird abandons his strategy. Why not wait for the Firebird to come back again? You know? And then why send the 2 least impressive people to go after him? In the first place, those who've proven that they can't do the job. Why do you even do that? Why do you make that move?
Well, one of the things, of course, is that this story has an initiatory quality to it. It has an initiatory quality, which means that the job of the Firebird, the job description of the Firebird, is to start dropping bombs into your family home or your structure or your community, and that's what it's doing. So there is something that has to shake. The kingdom has to shake, and normally when the kingdom in our lives shakes, we cling on to tradition. And the 2 older brothers are the parts of us that have more invested in tradition, more invested in their inheritance. But there has to be an accord between the king and the young, I can call him the young hunter, the young man. It's wrong in these stories to completely and totally identify always with the center of the narrative. The joy, and it is a joy of mythological thought, is that contained within all of us is an ambitious king and a docile horse and a rock bearing lots of instructions. So you say to yourself, I want to be generous. It is not a black and white thing. There is a whole forest of negotiation involved. And that's the fucking beauty of these stories. Do you not think?
He reads the pillar, but if I liken it to myself, I focus on the negative of choosing the pillar and don't think about the positive aspects. Because everything has a plus and minus. I mean, maybe the pillar has several other sides that you didn't choose to read. So in essence, he sits down in front of the pillar, and some of us spend our whole lives sitting in front of the pillar, afraid of which direction to go. Instead of choosing one, and at least if I choose one direction, at least the worst case is I knew that wasn't the right direction.
How many of us got to the pillar and went, I ain't making that decision, went home and said, sorry, Dad, but I know you love me. Have some milk and cookies.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, train for the ministry.
Did I hear you right that the pillar said whatever direction you're traveling, if you go left or right, this will be the outcome? Is that correct?
Yeah. If you keep going the direction you were going, you will die and your horse will die.
I like that a lot, but it seems less a boundary in space than in time. Because it's not just there's a canyon over to the left and you're going to fall in. It's that whatever direction you're in, if you keep it this way, so you can come at it from totally different directions.
Doesn't matter what direction you came from, it's going to say the same damn thing. That's right.
Is Ivan, as he is begging to leave, as he goes through the forest, as he arrives at the pillar, to what extent is he still serving the tyrant? And if he's not really serving the tyrant, what kind of evolution is going on inside for him?
The key is the word evolution, though, because again, it's, with an initiatory story, you're talking about a long span of time, and the things that get us moving in the first place are usually fairly unconscious, aren't they? The things that they're I cannot take this for a fucking second. I've got to get out of here. I've got to go, and so we catch the midnight train out of town, and we don't come back for a long time. You know. So there is something, he's hitting something hard, but God bless him for making a decision, for getting that part. I'm obsessed with the garden. I've got to keep talking about the garden. There's a clue in the story. It says the scent of the garden was so intoxicating that the sick and the ill would gather at the edges of the kingdom just to smell the scent. Now, it doesn't say that anyone was ever healed. It doesn't say they were nourished, but there is somewhere where The margins of the community are just gathered in and are literally enchanted. There is an enchantment going on in this whole scene. And when something is enchanted, something that is fiery and volatile is often one of two things. It'll either be water or fire. It has to come in to create a rupture or a break.
I'm beginning to think the king may be somewhat in cahoots with the Firebird, in this sense that if we all have all the roles have some relation to each of us, then the king is also, I did not, when the king was saying to the son, giving all the reasons, I thought that was insincere. And that he is maybe unconscious to him too, but he needs something that he doesn't have. And it's not the Firebird, the whole Firebird, in the sense it is, but he needs this son to something to happen there. For him, for the king in us to become truly king.
How many of us at the moment are living with golden apples disappearing from our bank accounts and our trust funds and our shares and everything on a cultural level? You know, we're living right now at this second in a time where the golden apples are going, and there is some weird part of me that breathes easier in it. You know, there is tremendous possibility right now. It is right to be depressed. It is a good thing to be depressed, but it's tedious to the gods if we stay there for too long. It's fucking tedious. And the way out of that is to go into the grief, so something fertile with some shit and some mud can turn to gold, some alchemy in it. But I love the fact that, as Danny was saying it this morning, I thought, wow, there's golden apples disappearing left, right, and center. There's some great shake culturally right now, but also huge possibility in it.
I want to add something, though, because no one sees the Firebird.
No.
No one sees the Firebird.
Even the guy?
Right.
Even Yvonne.
Even if, Yvonne manages to get one feather.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. This is what calls him out. This is what calls him out, because he's held a feather of the Firebird. No one else has seen it. No one else even really knows for sure. It's just the king has said, it must be the Firebird. And so what's going on today, what you're talking about, with the disappearing of the golden apples, if that's what they are, still no one is seeing the Firebird.
Well, maybe television is meant to kill your perception of the Firebird.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's the purpose of television.
To anesthetize us so that we cannot stay awake long enough to see the Firebird.
In the wrong places.
I'm struck with it's just something I've noticed in our culture, is the elevating of, blessing of incompetence, of mediocrity. And I think of the king with the first two sons sleeping through the night. The soccer mom comes, give him a trophy. You know, every kid comes out and shows up, so gets a trophy. So they're the ones, of course, who, you know, some would say became the young people who said, we could sell these worthless bonds and mortgages and make money on it. And the kings didn't say anything. They said, that's great, we'll have these mortgages. But the one who had touched the feather, got the feather, he wanted to go after that Firebird, and he had the longing, and that's to contract the son to the king. The king needs to have that son show him that longing.
Yeah.
I think it's a thing that we...
And that's where the passion was. The son carried the passion.
That's right.
To
That's
go and
right.
run.
That's right. And that's why the father didn't want to let him go.
The thing that I'm aware of myself is that I have had excitement. As a young man, I had excitement blessed by older men. They were giving me hollow trophies because it was excitement that they liked about my life. But I didn't have that longing yet. That longing had to come from a lot of different problems. I want to support somebody whose passion is part of their longing, not just the fact that they're loud and shout and jump. Otherwise, I'm just giving them a soccer trophies. I have to have discernment.
This is a great story.
So how do we live in a culture where most of our art is being made by people who are 23 years old? How do we live with that? Of course we're fucking sick. Of course we're ill. If our art is sick, we'll get sick.
It's just thinking about if the horse represents the king's ambition, and the only road where both of the people die is the one that he was already on. Maybe if the king's ambition dies, then it's okay. And but if he dies, maybe where something dies, something else can arise. So I don't know if are we supposed to interpret as a literal death of both the horse and him, or is it the death of who he was in order to allow something else to happen, something else to take its place?
It's mysterious.
Isn't it terrifying how wildly unconscious most of us are about these moments, and how much we would benefit from the moment we could comprehend them, having them fed into us, that we need them. We live in a culture where the ritual cuts of initiation have been replaced by perilous wounds. A ritual cut becomes a perilous wound.
I never followed that.
The idea that if it's not held, if the process that we are going through, because we are going to go through these processes whether we like it or not. The difference is the context and the container. And so the old stories of the Aboriginal elders taking everyone out to the hut and saying, Umgumba's coming, look that way, and as they look that way, pop, you knock one of their teeth out. There is a ritual cut that alerts the soul. It alerts the soul that some sort of deep work is being going on, because the soul is continually rising up in some oceanic way to express itself, and it rejoices in the difficult and the flat and the complicated parts of us. It's a strange thing, isn't it?
I think it's a biological. So one of the reasons, at least in the way I was taught how to take responsibility for life, is to get cut.
Yeah.
When I make a commitment to be a protector of life, bang, there it is, how to be responsible for the next generation. But there's a biological imperative that I think it's driven, and we have to go through that kind of a tempering process. If we don't go through that tempering process on a voluntary basis, we create something that simulates that experience, like a car accident. How many of us have had car accidents when we were 17? A lot of us. How many wrecked motorcycles? The other half, bicycles. If you don't do that, you go out and you bust windows in a liquor store, you break in, all those things, because you need to go through the body needs that.
You get 500 tattoos.
Exactly.
Every part of your body is pierced.
Here's a story. You don't know this. The plane I was on the way to this conference caught fire. It caught fire. Halfway between Newark and Minneapolis, I just gazed out at the wing, and there was smoke. And then suddenly the air in the cabin got very, very thin and suddenly smelled of burnt electrics. That's not good news when you're fucking... And as this happened, I thought, so this is how it ends. And I peered out the window as I was trying to order a margarita. At the same time, I thought, fuck, at least I'm going to have a hit of tequila. and the clouds parted, and I saw how high we were off the ground. And I thought of this story. I thought of the Firebird, I thought of Icarus, and I thought, here I am. Did I not read enough stories?
That's beautiful.
And I made it. Somehow we got back.
I want to say something about the soccer trophies.
Yeah. The wall of mediocrity.
Very beautiful thing that you shared that, and it has something to do with what Miguel is talking about in the wound.
Yeah.
And maybe something to do with the feeling that we have when the father seems to be indifferent to the failure of the first two sons. There's a wound there, isn't there? Instead of saying, you lied to me! You lied to me! That would be a gift, wouldn't it? That would be paying attention to the actual condition of the person.
The truth of it, yeah.
The truth of it. And so when we see all these little boys, each one gets a trophy. Each one gets a trophy. No matter what they did, no matter how bad they were, they get a trophy. And the one kid that was the worst one that gets a trophy, isn't that a cut? Isn't that a wound? And that he doesn't know that he was the worst one?
Yeah.
and he thinks he's got a trophy like all the others. What kind of a fucking weird society is that?
We've lost the ability to criticize intelligently. That's what breaks my heart. Guys of my generation in their 30s, we are, because everybody's doing fine and everybody's great and everything is completely horizontal, we don't know how to approach the great art of men and women that are older than us. And so yet another connection is severed, another connection to the ancestors is severed, because we can't possibly approach it. How on earth can you think realistically about Goya? How dare you approach the art of Rembrandt when you have completely lost the ability to talk coherently about it, and you have lost all the discipline required to go towards that place?
So here's something that I just got in what you're saying, is that when Ivan comes to the pillar, he's actually come out of the horizontal and met the vertical.
Straight up. And
Right?
what's it telling him? Something now has to die.
Unavoidable.
So this is just something I've said before, but this whole question of going forward, let's say as a young poet, what happens when they set up writing schools in the universities for you? That's without any kicking there. And, you know, someone says, I'd like to be a poet, and you say, okay, good. You're going to prison for 5 years. Or something, but not have a university course where they can discourse along. You hear me?
Yeah.
That's when the spark goes out. I don't know how many people I know who've gone to those courses, and it seems as if they're doing well, and they all get A's and shit like that, and something's gone. They got support at the wrong moment.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it requires a tremendous amount of failure to get the spark back.
Yeah, but then everyone believes in writing good reviews. So they get 5 reviews and 4 are successful, and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes in our upbringing, you know, stuff gets put on us, you know, experience with childhood, you know, the inheritance of ancestry, you know, all the cultural paradigms that get imposed on us, coding us with these incredible, we look like mummies, a lot of us, you know, energetically. And then through these things that we do, we go around putting gold coats of paint on us, and we go, that's a great, beautiful paint job. But underneath that, there's all this other shit that's never been dealt with. So if you're not putting a coat of veneer on a pile of shit that's covering a beautiful soul, then that's good. If you're not looking at. But if I'm looking around, I think that that's what we're talking about here, is the coat of veneer that the culture or some of the customs of our culture has about these things that doesn't get to the actual truth of what the reality is. So how do you discern? That's what we were talking about last night. How do you discern when you're calling it a generosity gift, but it's really a selfish act? So that's part of the thing, that you have the discernment. And to use the word that's very tricky, but discriminate. Be able to tell apart what something is and what something is really not. So when something is coming at your door saying, "Come, little one, what I have a beautiful gift for you," you know, you got to know that that's what that is, you know. So and that's part of it, you know. And you don't know. It's not. There's no recipe. There's no package. There's no 5 easy steps. Bang, bang, bang. Here it is, because it looks different every single time. So I think that's what we're trying to get, is how to get to the truth, because the level of numbness that comes, especially when the father says, "Oh, I didn't see anything, one level of numbness comes in, because nothing happened. The second son, sleep, numbness, even deeper. When you were talking about, that's what the sense of numbness that the culture goes into, how frozen we get when we don't want to, when we forget how to react, how to truly be angry about injustices, like in that poem of Stafford, you know. What is that line? To know what occurred but not recognize the fact. That's what that means. To see what occurs and not recognize the fact. In other words, say those fucking apples were stolen. And I fell asleep or whatever. And there you go. So and that's denial, is another way of saying it. So I mean, that's part of it.
It strikes me there's another option here when you get to the pillar. We've always heard when you come to a fork in the road, take it. The other option is don't. The other option is be still. You don't have to go forward. You don't have to achieve more or get more gold. Our young boys in our urban cities today they get to the pillar and it's a gang, someplace to belong. The alternative maybe is the grace of stillness and not having to choose any of those three paths. That wouldn't add much to the rest of your story, Randy.
I can't sense any pirates and gypsies in that, so it's maybe a monk, I suppose.
But maybe in Los Angeles.
I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me. I think that the gang life is actually an attempt to build up some passion and some ferocity and get to the pillar, but it isn't being at the pillar. It's an attempt for initiation. Yeah, which is always an attempt to get to the vertical dimension. Do you see what I'm saying? And so, but this thing of stopping as an option, just stopping and staying there, you know, I guess that is an option, but it sounds to me like it's just an abdication. It feels like abdication.
Well, Yvonne's on a mission, and if you stop at the pillar, the mission is over.
He has a mission, he has longing, and he has passion.
The thing that's going on is when he gets to the pillar, to me, what I saw, he started to weep.
He did. He sat down and wept.
It was like that was, he was at a point in his path, there was nothing to do but sit and weep.
Okay, so something hot, something fiery has led into something watery. So immediately we get, of course, fire, heat. The firebird has associations of spirit, and water, obviously, associations of soul. So something has happened quite quickly in this story. Sorry, you.
Oh yeah, about the game thing. I've heard recently, I don't remember who this was attributed to, because it was a quote from somewhere, but that with kids in inner cities these days, gunning down virtual mirror images of themselves, that this stems from a deep longing to die, but what they're longing for doesn't have to be a physical death. But it is a deep longing to die, for the child itself to die, and because there is no initiation ceremony, because there is no intergenerational solidarity, it's misunderstood as actually a longing to physically die.
Yeah.
Oh. These many trees, these rituals, preliminal, the isolation, wound, reassimilation, live, die, live. These are all those. It's happening all the time. And so he gets to, he's isolated to go off on a stroke or reaches the pillar and has a death there again. And now he's ahead is a third part. We know it. We know in the story something else is going to happen. He's not going to stay there.
So yeah, and it's good. It's important to remember that the story is a ritual map. It is a complete map of an initiatory process. But right now, what we have is one piece of the map. That's all we have. Yeah. So we can't think that that's the whole story.
Jim. The stone made me think of two incidents that you have described in his autobiography. One is when he was a boy, there was an outcrop of stone he used to go to regularly and he'd sit on it. And he would go through a shift where 1 minute he'd be this conscious person, and the next minute his consciousness was the consciousness of the stone, aware of something today he's sitting on it. And so he went back and forth. And the other was after he went through this big split with Freud, totally disoriented. And one day he had this feeling of a need to drop into a different level of consciousness. And one afternoon he's just sitting in his office and all of a sudden he let go. He dropped, all he knew is he dropped down and he ended up in a cave talking to this old being. And this stone seemed so mysterious that what's written on it seems to be its own consciousness. It's not something engraved in, it's the stone consciousness saying, it's a shift to another level to take place in order to figure out what to do next.
I like that. the mineral is the memory. And so there's ancestral memory on this stone. That's a good image.
And on that
to
image,
to end with.
we should end.
And we'll pick it up again tomorrow.